share that as some people know, I'm unexpectedly delayed in Copenhagen, Denmark. So this morning, they have a park that they completely rebuilt and retrofitted. It's a beautiful park, but the main job that it has when it rains is that it holds a bunch of water. It's almost all below grade, but there's hockey in there. There's um, oh gosh, soccer and beautiful places to sit around. But it's a beautiful amenity. But one of its main jobs, again, is that when it floods, that it holds the water. So it's I'm doing field trips in preparation for our team here, of course.
Well, that's great to hear. I'm glad that you're making best use of your time and you're getting good notes back for how we can do some cool stuff here in the district. So I'm glad that you're out in the field. Okay, so we are going to kick off our full task force meeting. Thank you everyone for joining us. We've had a lot of discussions over the last 2 months between our meetings, and so there's a lot to report out on. We have a full agenda that will offer opening remarks from both CEO Gaddis and Director Wells, our co-chairs. We'll have some presentations on about 6 of the action plans. We have 20 in total, but we'll just talk about 6 of them as an example of what the work looks like and the expectation of all the lead agencies that are working on these plans. We will give updates on the action teams. Like I said, we've had some great meetings in between our last full task force meetings, so we'll want to report out on that. We'll have some homework as usual. Until this is done, we will always have a little bit of homework and a few closeout items that we'll talk about. Thank you. Next slide, please. So with that, I believe we have a little bit of information and backgrounds, just how we got here. If this is your first time joining us, if you're a public member, just want to give you a background. On September 2022, the city administrator convened this task force, and this task force reports to the deputy mayor of operations and infrastructure, Lucinda Babers, and there are 2 co-chairs, CEO David Gaddis from DC Water and Director Tommy Wells from DOEE. We had a kickoff meeting in November of 2021, and the full task force members, the task force members are comprised of 13 DC government agencies and 15 consulting members that make up federal partners and public partners. All proceedings, all dealings are done in the public realm. We have video, we record all of our meetings. We also post minutes and any other resource documents on our website, which is dcfloodtaskforce.org. That's all one word, dcfloodtaskforce.org. We have had some public listening sessions that occurred in March, and we were able to gather some great public input at that point. Next slide, please. So we have 2 action teams and we cover 9 categories. The residential resilience is covered by Silil Kakar and Apra Noah from DC Water, and they cover points 1 through 4. And the governance and coordination is led by Nick Barnard and Meredith Upchurch from DOE, and they cover categories 5 through 9. So in our timeline here, we have progressed quite a bit, and we are now just a little past our midway point, and we have a lot of momentum that moves us into our final stages of getting these action plans actually completed. So our schedule for our full task force, we meet every other month on the 3rd Wednesday. Our next full task force meeting will be in July, on July 20th. Our action team meetings are every month, and we have the residential resilience that meets on the 2nd Tuesday of the month, and the governance and coordination that meets on the 2nd Friday of every month. Our final report for these task force are due at some point in November of this year. We'll have an action plan for each of the 9 categories to be very thorough and complete. After the action plans are submitted, we will have some annual follow-up to track the progress and any budget discussions that each action plan priority might cover. Next slide, please. Again, the task force website has action plan meeting information, full task force meeting information, and any presentations or resources that we have stored in our website location. It's all there, dcfloodtaskforce.org. So our full task force meeting goal for today is to, one, present the 8 action plans as an example. We'll discuss that action plan process. We'll discuss the expectation from task members so that we can make sure that we're capturing all your thoughts and feedback as we start to, again, finalize these action plans. And then we will also report out on the action plan progress, the action team progress, so that everyone on the full task force can know what has happened in both residential resilience and the governance coordination action teams. Next slide, please. So with that, we will have our opening remarks from, I believe the first up is CEO David Gaddis from DC Water. Mr. Gaddis?
Thank you very much, Monty, for the introduction, and thank all of the members for being with us today. The slide you see here is the supporting staff at DC Water, which includes Mark Battle, and he runs the legal department for us, and then Nadine Headley, which works for Ms. Powell, our COO, and then Salil Kakar does a fantastic job as being a support as well to Ms. Powell's a senior advisor, and then Barbara Mitchell from our legal department, and Opera that heads up our political side of our business, and then Ms. Powell, our COO, and then Ms. Williams, Chief Communications Officer. I wanted to open up with that team first, just to show everyone the DC Water core team. So we put some of our best and brightest, I think, forward. But one of the things I want to talk about was that, out of this September 10th, 2020 storm that led to the formation of this task force, there's been a number of things that have occurred since then and that have pushed us to do some things that maybe we would not have done if it wasn't for that storm. I know that at DC Water, one of the initiatives that came forward for us was the creation of a visual live emergency management system that actually ties in all of the DC Water departments and focuses them on the common goal of providing rapid response to residents during any emergency that we have, especially a flooding incident. This product just last night received an international award at the Global Water Conference that was held this year in Madrid, Spain, this week as part of the Flood Task Force effort. This tool will be added to be available to all DC agencies responding to floods. And this smart water, it was named the Smart Water Project of the Year in Madrid. So we look forward to unveiling it to the rest of the members of the task force and allowing others to view it, touch it, feel it, and see if it's something that they would like to add as well. But we think it's definitely an enhancement for DC Water during these types of emergencies. Also what has come forward, and I think is fantastic. And my co-chair, Mr. Wells, and Director Wells, Chairman Wells, wears a number of hats. He and I are both been placed on the mayor's Build Back Better task force. And our effort is to secure dollars for projects, including flooding. And so Mr. Chairman Wells chairs that economic piece for us, and we'll be really fighting to get dollars for us in the future around the task force as we move forward and for flooding. So I think that's fantastic news as well. Some other things I think that have happened, especially on the DC Water side, and the progress to date has been in communicating with agencies. for alignment and getting public input on the different concepts that we can apply as well. We are about at the halfway point at this point in time. There's been a lot of progress. The next half of, I think, going forward for us will be documenting the points and the resources required for any type of emergency or situation and executing that. We are separating out low-hanging fruit that we see there and jumping on those quickly. And then there's some options for the things that are a little bit tougher to implement. And so we're working on all of those. So I appreciate thus far what the team has been able to put together and where we're at as an organization. And there's a lot of things that have been done by this task force. And I think there'll be greater things, especially when we're able to get more money. So Chairman Wells, that's kind of on you to get the money and hand it out. So I'll now turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, David, and congratulations, as always, to DC Water. I do believe that there's just a level of excellence that is expected now from government entities in DC and then especially DC Water. I think that it wasn't always that way, but it is something that now it is. I'm very proud that the city is a leader and kind of a trainer and teacher for other jurisdictions. I'll just say that one of the things I've learned is that the most powerful thing you can have is really a plan. It's not necessarily the most powerful person in the room, but it becomes the most powerful person when they have a plan. And so we're finding with the ARPA funds, we're finding with other opportunities, because we've had plans ready to go, that DOEE is receiving funds. And I know because of DC Water's plan around lead free and some of the other work, that DC Water is ready to go. So this work is the framework and that will help leverage in funds for the city for years to come. And so this work is incredibly important, but it's really something that, again, that the city will appreciate having, because when funds become available, we'll know and be able to explain what and why of what we're going to do with that. So thank you to everybody that's part of this. I do believe we have some of the smartest people in the country working on it. And I know that David and I are really pleased with the work that's going on in the committees. And I believe that'll make a big difference. And so we're just want to encourage everyone to keep doing what you're doing, and it will make a big difference. So thanks.
Thank you both. That was those are great remarks and wonderful framing for where we are right now in this process. A lot of work has been done by all the agencies that are supporting this, as well as our private partners and federal partners. And I should have said at the very beginning, happy Infrastructure Week. Everything that we do has to do with the plan, the design, and the built environment. And so infrastructure is what is keeping us at the table with these plans and discussions. So I just want to say happy Infrastructure Week. I'm sure all of you are pretty busy with being involved with something exciting, something that's sharing great ideas with others this week. So keep it going and let's keep doing this work too. So we have our action plan presentations that we want to talk about now. We'll have both Meredith Upchurch and Nick Bernard from DOEE to share a little bit more about the hard work that's gone into putting these action plans together and how you as partners on this task force can start to finalize your action plans. Nick and Meredith?
But first, we're going to turn it over to Salil.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nick.
Yep.
So a little background on how the action plans were developed. When the task force kicked off, we had 9 categories that were defined. Each one of those 9 categories were unique. There were some interrelations between them, but they were very critical to getting aligned and achieving the goal of flood protection for the city. Now, within the 9 categories, there were subcategories. So there was an action plan developed for each one of those subcategories. And in the end product is going to be a comprehensive action plan that rolls all of these up into one plan. So to get a uniformity across all the different categories and between all the different agencies, an action template was developed that everybody follows so that every action plan will have the same template and you'll be able to find the right issue in the right location. Initially and startup, just to bring everybody up to speed, there were several ideas that were thrown up as sub-plans or sub-action plans within each category. Then there was an effort made to develop a matrix and a methodology to identify which ones were the highest benefit and to prioritize them so that they could be started early. So those have been green lighted to move forward. It also had the benefit of having the public listening sessions, provide input on them. And the way they categorized or what they presented are going to be, not every one of those plans is long-term. There's going to be several of those that are immediate, that can be implemented within a year with current funding levels within the different agencies. And there are some that will take longer to implement. But all of that will be laid out in the action plan. Thank you. Next slide, please. Now, given that we're going to do 20 plus action plans that are going to be presented to the task force, how do you go through and get comments and accept them? So the plan is, no pun on the word intended, but like this task force meeting today, Nick and Meredith are going to present the DOE develop action plans. Over the next several weeks, there'll be time to review them and receive comments from the task force. The public is also invited to comment on them. They'll be posted on the website. Once the comments come in a couple of weeks, the action teams that are the worker bees behind the action plans as a team across the agencies will get together, look at the comments, incorporate them into the action plan, and then the finished product or semi-finished product will be presented again at the next task force meeting, which is 2 months from now, for approval. Or comments if there's additional comments. Next slide. On a timeline basis, this is the same thing that's I just said, but shown graphically. May 18th, which is today, the action plans presented. Looking to get comments back and incorporate those comments with the input of the action teams. So at the next task force meeting, we'll have those to present for approval or additional comments. I believe the 6 plans that are going to be presented today. There's about 20, 21 plus minus couple that'll be towards the end of the project. Since this is the first time out of the gate with the task force seeing the action plans, there are going to be 6 presented. Next task force meeting on July 20th, we'll see a whole lot more coming in, and the balance of them will be presented in September. November 16th would be the last task force meeting on this topic. Next slide. Nick, you've got this?
Yeah. Thanks, Salil. So Salil kind of gave you the setup. And so I guess my job and Meredith's job is to actually start going through the first 6 action plans that we've drafted so far. And so that's what we're going to do. I'm going to talk briefly about these 6 that you see on the screen. And we're starting with these because the action teams have given these a green light. The action teams have said, essentially the pathway to completing these actions is relatively straightforward. There's, some initial work that's already been done. We the action teams think that we can go forward and develop an action plan for this. So that's why you're seeing these today. And you might be asking, well, why is there an action plan if some of the work has already been done? Well, in every case, having the task force's attention and input on these issues will make the implementation of these actions more successful. And I think we've already seen how action team input has actually made some of these plans better, and it's just going to make it easier to implement going forward. So I think that's really one of the roles of the task force. And just real quickly if you go back one slide, the action plans that you're going to hear today, they don't come with a lot of funding requirements except for the first and the last one, but the rest of them are primarily things that can be accomplished via staff time and staff coordination. So if you go to the next slide, ultimately each action plan will be a PDF document. You're seeing what that looks like roughly here. There'll be about 4 to 5 pages, and they each, they have a template and similar structure. There's an overview, there's background, there's a section on equity, there's a section on budget, timeline, and then also on public input. And those are the same for every action plan. And the idea is that when they're voted on and approved, they will live on the task force website. And anyone can go and look to see what the task force said we wanted to do over the next couple of years, and can track progress that way. I'm actually not going to bring a screen share up and go through a Word document right now. Instead, we're just going to go over the highlights of the 6 action plans. So we'll just dive in. So the first one is action 3.1. So this is flood smart homes, and this is in category 3, which is floodproofing individual homes and facilities. DOE is a lead here, but obviously this kind of touches many different agencies. And if you go to the next slide, an overview of what we're trying to do here is essentially make all residential structures in the district to be more flood resilient and flood protected. And our focus initially is going to be on homes that are in the FEMA mapped floodplains. And so for DC, that really means Ward 7, Watts Branch, Ward 8, Oxon Run, and then a little bit in Ward 6 in Southwest DC. One of what we highlight in blue here is one thing that's come up in the action teams is that we'd really like to expand this program to areas of interior flooding. And that's something that I think Flood Smart Homes can do in the later years, especially after those areas of interior flooding have been actually mapped by the integrated flood model. So, all right, so we're focusing on homes that have flood risk. So what are we actually going to do? Well, the plan is for the government to cover most of the costs for 2 things. One is a resilience assessment. So anyone who wants to participate in this program can just say, I'd like a resilience assessment, and we will send somebody out, and they will look at your home and go through a checklist of things that you could do to make your home more resilient. So that could include elevating your utilities. It could include elevating the entire home, sealing HVAC equipment to prevent water intrusion, or other kind of basement repairs to floodproof both the basement and the house. And so after that resilience assessment, we'll have a professional engineer kind of look and make a determination on what activities will be useful and beneficial to this property, and then DOE through this program would pay for most of the cost of actually doing that upgrade. And the fact that the government plans to cover most of the cost is something that has been asked for in multiple different ways in public forums. And is something that and the need for this program in general has also been brought up a number of times. So I think we're trying to respond to the needs of the residents, and also what we see in terms of flood risk perspective. And so last year that there is 2.3 million in Mayor Bowser's FY23 budget. It still has to go through council and be ultimately approved, but the ball is rolling, and hopefully, if everything gets approved, we will actually have money to start this program in FY23. The mayor's budget only includes money in FY23, so if we want to do this in future years, we would need to continually ask for additional money going forward. So if you go to the next slide. So this, every action plan has a section on budget where you identify, what year, what agency, and how much they're requesting and from what source. So you see here in 2022, we already are getting some money from FEMA grants, but in 2023 through 2027, we're expecting to request 2.3 million in local funding, and then hopefully getting some support also from FEMA and other grant funds. And so I'll note here, I think especially if this program is going to be expanded outside the floodplain, there's going to be you're going to need money in those out years to cover those homes. And I guess the other thing to note here is as far as the budget goes, action plans that require funding to be implemented, we're going to ask the action teams and action plans to list essentially what that need is, and then if the task force approves the action plan, obviously you're not guaranteeing that funding is going to be there, right? We can't guarantee that that we'll get FEMA grants or that it'll make it through the local budget, but I think we are hoping that a task force approval will mean that there is some commitment to push forward and ask for this funding to continue going forward. So I can go to the next slide. I can hand this one to Meredith.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to go over the legislative and regulatory updates that we have created action plans for. So first off, talk about the Flood Resilience Act. Next slide. So the purpose of this legislation, over the course of developing flood regulation updates over the last few years, we determined that there may not have been explicit authority to regulate anything other than the 100-year floodplain. And we knew to account for climate changes that we wanted to expand flood protections to the 500-year floodplain. So this legislation was developed to authorize DOEE to establish by rule the definition of the flood hazard locations. So by FEMA, that includes the 100-year floodplain. Now DOE through the regulations, which I'll talk about next, that will include the 500-year floodplain, but we have this enabling legislation to allow to do that. Also to add a requirement to require flood insurance when properties are newly constructed or substantially improved, that requirement can be a condition of occupancy. Now, it's important to mention that there is no intention to require flood insurance at this point for those construction projects, because we know that there's an affordability issue, and we'll talk a little later about some of the work that's being done on the insurance. Next slide, please. So for implementation, in an equity category, the big issue here is it's reducing risk and impact to all residents and buildings. So that includes all areas of the district. Ensures landlords have insurance protection, or we will be able to require that, which can protect a lot of vulnerable residents who are renters. And as I said, we're going to definitely make sure that insurance is affordable before this insurance is required. Good news, there's no budget required. Extra good news, this legislation has already been introduced by council. There have been hearings, and it's been voted on it's had its first vote. So we anticipate approval in the coming months. That's it for the Flood Resilience Act. So next I'll go to the regulations, flood hazard regulations. And please feel free if there are any questions, you can speak up. or put a message in the chat or raise your hand if you want to ask any questions. Certainly want to respond to any questions anybody may have. Okay, the next regulatory update is for the DOE flood hazard rules. That is the municipal regulations title. I'm going to get this wrong, so I'm not going to say it. Please go to the next slide. So the goal of the flood regulations update is overall to reduce long-term flood risk and to protect properties. Like I mentioned, we want to expand the regulations to the 500-year floodplain, meaning buildings in the 500-year floodplain would have to be built to be flood protected if they are newly built or substantially improved. We want to make the design flood elevation, meaning the level that a property would need to be protected to, equivalent to what's already existing actually in the DC construction codes, which was updated a couple of years ago. We're creating a tidal shoreline buffer, which is where we expect to see high tide in the year 2080. So areas that will be underwater during high tide in 2080. We want those areas to be protected, and also to ensure that any construction will not affect other properties through their building in the floodplain. We don't want to make flooding worse for any adjacent properties. So that is called a no adverse impact analysis. Next slide. First, I just want to mention that there have been extensive outreach over the last couple of years with agency stakeholders. There have been public meetings targeted towards residents, targeted towards businesses, utilities, technical experts within the engineering community to get a lot of feedback on how these rules were being developed. And this also has had a strong equity focus. We heard a lot of concerns about impacts to neighborhoods, you know, a goal with making sure a neighborhood can stay intact and that people can stay in their homes. So one result of that is we added a $200,000 improvement threshold for single family homes, so that if there's any improvement done that's under $200,000, there are no requirements for that property to include the flood protection. Certainly voluntarily, we highly recommend that, but it would not be required. So we are just about to start the formal rulemaking process on this effort. And so it will go through publication in the register, comment periods, reviews, and updates. And there's also no budget required. That's being done with current DOE staff. So that is it on legislation and regulation action plans for now. Thanks. Pass it back to Nick.
Yeah, thanks, Meredith. So we're gonna get two action plans in one here. They're both updates, mapping updates. So one is a mapping update to the Watts Branch community. That's the image. Well, as part of that's Mayfair Mansions, which is just off of Watts Branch, but the Watts Branch update actually extends all the way east. And then the other update is to the maps in Oxen Run. And if you go to the next slide, why we are doing this? Well, essentially, we've been working with the Army Corps for some time on various projects, but they have completed better modeling than the modeling that FEMA currently uses for their flood insurance rate maps. And so our goal at DOE is to always make sure that everybody has access to the best and latest modeling. And so we are going to work with FEMA so that they will update their flood insurance rate maps to reflect the latest and greatest modeling that the Army Corps has done. This is a relatively typical kind of administrative process that communities go through, but we felt it was important to bring this up in the task force and let people know because, you know, I think residents are going to have questions about it and it may overlap with other agencies' outreach efforts in those areas. So it will come with a small budget requirement, so 6,000 total for both map updates, which, you know, I think DOE expects to just take care of with our own local budget. We kind of expect to be doing this for Watts Branch first in 2022, and Oxen Run will be later, mostly because we have to work with Prince George's County to make sure that our map update is kind of coordinated with their map update. And the last thing to note here is, this map update is kind of technical, but I think it's interesting and useful. This map update will actually reduce the number of homes in the floodplain, which from a resident perspective is good, which means there will be less residents that have a FEMA required mandate to have flood insurance if they have a mortgage. Now you might be thinking like, okay, but what about climate change? I thought climate change is making everything worse. That is true, but FEMA does not look at climate change at all when they create their maps. So all their maps are kind of like past looking. But essentially the maps that the Army Corps have created are using a little bit better data. They have some additional surveys that FEMA didn't have before. So this is really just trying to get the best and latest data in the hands of the residents and FEMA, and but we're still very much interested in the effects of sea level rise and climate change and increased precipitation, which is it's all kind of related to why we're expanding the regulatory floodplain to the 500-year because we know our risk is increasing even if the official maps are shrinking a little bit in the 100-year. So next slide. So the last action plan that we're going to talk about today is one about yearly public outreach. So this one, DOE is going to be the lead agency on this, but it's really one that we're expecting a lot of input and support from multiple agencies. And DC Silver Jackets is not really an agency, but it's a forum that I think a lot of this conversation will happen in. If you go to the next slide. Essentially, the goal of this is we need to make sure that we are coordinating amongst agencies on kind of like annual outreach efforts and messages. And, we're hoping that every year we can get together and talk about what each agency's plans are for the year in terms of flood awareness, and then also potentially work together on producing some jointly come up with materials. So things like mailers out to residents, Flood Awareness Week, which we've done, we did last year and are going to do again this year at the end of June. And, like this public advertising campaign, we are working with DISB and HCEMA this year to put advertisements about the importance of flood insurance on WMATA. So I think, these kinds of opportunities and others, I think we're interested in making sure we do every year in a kind of a coordinated fashion. Next slide. As far as how this actually will get implemented, I think, well, there's the question of where do we focus on, and I think we're in general interested in focusing on the most flood vulnerable communities. So that's Watts Branch, Oxen Run, and then also including some of these interior flood risk neighborhoods in Northeast and elsewhere. As far as timeline, the main requirement is that these agencies get together annually to talk about the plans for the year and then produce a high-level outreach plan that will, essentially cover the entire year. And individual agencies will still have their own events and outreach, but the idea is that at least every agency should kind of be aware of what's going on. So as an example, if we're going to go out into Oxen Run and talk about a FEMA map update, HCEMA and DISB would probably like to know in case they start getting questions about insurance or other related issues. And then you see here the budget, based on what we've done in the past couple of years, we've spent probably close to $70,000 across all of the agencies every year in doing outreach. And probably about $50,000 of this we've managed to get from FEMA funds every year. So we're going to continue to pursue that as a prime source of doing this outreach funding. But I think it is also safe, and you'll see this in the action plan, to assume that around $5,000 will need to be chipped in from local budgets, from agencies like DOEE, DC Water, DASB, those kinds of things. So just flagging here that there is a small budget associated with doing this kind of yearly outreach. So next slide. So that's a wrap for all of the action plans that we wanted to talk about today. But I thought it would be good to just to go over again how we're going to do this going forward. So what you just heard was step one for action plan for the 6 action plans that I just presented. So this is the task force's first introduction to those action plans. Now the next step, step 2, is tomorrow we will send out a link to the Word documents of all of these action plans, and you'll have 4 weeks to review and make comment. We'll also make these available to the public for them to comment. And then after those 4 weeks, we'll look at all the comments and we will make any revisions. And then, as you see in step 3, we'll send it out again 2 weeks in advance of the July 20th task force meeting. So that way, we'll have comments, we'll revise them, we will send out the revised version so that you have 2 weeks to look at them. And then when it comes to the July 20th meeting, we're going to actually ask for a vote from this task force on the action plans that you saw today and that you saw in the Word documents that were sent around. So this is, I guess, kind of a heads up that we gave you the appetizer today, just kind of introduce you to the ideas in those 6 action plans. But in July, we're actually going to ask for a vote and hopefully get approval that that these action plans have task force support, and then we can include them as kind of like the final deliverable for the task force. So this might be a good place to pause for this task force meeting. Next up, we can kind of give updates on the various action teams and categories and what we've been working on. But I think we should pause here for questions either on the process of approving action plans or comments on the action plans that you've heard already.
I'll also add that we recognize that there might be some action plans that are distributed, and once you read them and have some comments, maybe you're not totally comfortable with voting on it yet. And so if there is an action plan that falls in that category, and then we can hold it from the next agenda. We don't have to vote on it at the next meeting. If it needs some more work, needs some more review, that's fine. Do what's needed.
Nick, you did, and Meredith did a great job explaining.
I was going to say the same thing. It's so thorough. Just the breakdown of all the parts and pieces of the full plan for each category is just. I think that we've covered so much, and the action team meetings have really helped bring a lot of that, a lot of those sections to light as something that we really wanted to get into the details on. So thank you so much. I think that kind of put it out there. So if folks have thoughts offline, please feel free, of course, to share it with Nick and Meredith, Salil, and Opera in particular, and then we can incorporate that in the thinking moving forward. I'm looking to see if there's any questions in the chat. I don't see anything. So I think we're going to continue on with our agenda. We have some updates from the action teams, and we are going to have both DISB and ORM, folks from DISB and ORM to speak to that. I'm sorry, excuse me, before we go there is one message here from Julie Koster. It says, can you remind me where the infrastructure list fits into this? And I think that we have that covered a little bit later, or yeah, we do. I see Meredith shaking her head. So we'll
It might also be worth mentioning, so the action plans you heard today, none of them were about the infrastructure list, but there will be eventually an action plan that specifically talks about all the infrastructure projects that, you know, that are flood related and how we're going to prioritize them. It's an action plan that we're working on. So more to come on that one. We won't have any specific, nothing specific today on it, but eventually.
Right, but one thing though, Julia, if there's something that's not on the infrastructure list that has been circulated, and you feel as though it needs to be there, please submit that. That would be very helpful. All right, so we'll have Disby and ORM speak to the first category. Thank you.
Thanks. This is Philip Barla from the Department of Insurance Securities and Banking. So as far as flood and sewer line backup insurance, we've had a lot of discussion about this so far. A lot of the discussion has focused on the gaps and issues with existing insurance and insurance-like products available to help address flooding issues. The existing options include the National Flood Insurance Program, commercial insurance, and I realize I maybe used a little jargon there. When I say commercial insurance, I mean insurance sold by private companies as opposed to the government. But that's commercial insurance means your homeowners or renters insurance. And there are some service contracts that deal with utility lines that could also be useful in addressing water damage to your home. In order to help us focus our attention moving forward, what we intend to do is try to develop 2 or 3 specific proposals, because that's one of the things I think we've determined is there's not one magic bullet solution that will address all of the insurance needs. So we're gonna try to develop 2 or 3 proposed solutions that could include things like captive insurance, parametric insurance, micro insurance, meaning very small insurance policies, or a combination or layering of various options to try to address the insurance issues. The goal is not that these are final solutions, but that having some specific proposals for the action team and the public to react to will help us move forward to some specific solutions to recommend. And with that, I will see if Jed has anything that he wants to add.
No, thank you so much, Philip. Appreciate the update. Definitely a lot of additional work we're working on.
All right, then I certainly happy to take any questions that anybody has.
Well, we know that this is not a shy crowd, but I guess that the presentations are so complete in their information, or it's so new that people need to digest it. So maybe that's it, Philip. What do you think?
It'll probably be once we have some proposals out there, I'm sure that will generate more discussion.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure.
All right.
Okay, so we will move forward. Thank you so much, Philip, and thank you, Jed. We will move forward with our residential resilience category 4. So this is led by DC Water, Salil.
Thank you, Monty. And just real quick, I know Director Wells talked about Copenhagen and all the features that the city has incorporated. That's absolutely a fantastic place to go visit and watch the features. Closer to home, not too far from us, is Carroll Creek in Frederick, Maryland. That has a wonderful park out there that was modeled somewhat like the Riverwalk in San Antonio, but it's done a phenomenal job of blue-green infrastructure to stop flooding in the city. So just to get an idea on what different infrastructure looks like. All right, back to sewers. So this particular category is sewer line backups and backwater valve installations. So effort to date, which is started earlier and is ongoing, is with help from Vermesia of HCMA. We're able to apply to FEMA for a grant to continue the backwater valve installation program to residents. We had more requests coming in from folks for backwater valve installation. So we're hoping that funding comes through later on this year for us to go forward with that program. Also working with Meredith and put us in touch with Office of Planning, which is one of the great things about this program, is to be able to reach across different agencies and know who has the information to be able to optimize solutions. We're able to get information across the city, so we might be able to get a good handle on how many homes will need the backwater valve. Even if it's an estimate, it's better than what we have right now, and that'll help us predict how much additional funding we need moving forward. The second piece here that's highlighted is the incentive backwater valve for backwater valve installation. And that somehow possibly could tie into what Philip talked about in the insurance part. Is there a potential to reduce your insurance rates if you have a backwater valve, maybe on the home insurance side? And the last piece here is require backwater valve installation in codes. And we have been working with Chris Bailey and DCRA in helping strengthen some of the codes that's already existing, but some of the requirements to enforce them would have needed some assistance, and that's what we've helped do. Also working with DOE to see if we can add a piece in real estate disclosure requirements relating to backwater valve. Several other homeowners we've talked to don't even know if they have a backwater valve or if they need a backwater valve. So that's a great opportunity to do that. So all of that will be combined and packed together in a action plan, which hopefully should be out 2 months from now. Thank you. Any questions? Monty, maybe we can move on.
Okay,
Next.
so we will move along. So next slide, please, Adria. So we're going to go to governance and coordination, switching over, and we're going to cover category 5, which is DMWA.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is actually Opera with DC Water. I'm standing in for Alan from the Deputy Mayor's Office of Infrastructure and Operations to talk about our flood mitigation and infrastructure projects, which is actually a host of projects and the more broader conversation that we actually need to discuss and acknowledge, or that we wanted to take the opportunity to discuss and acknowledge at this point, is that, as you can see, and I know the numbers are very tiny, but these programs, these projects take a lot of money. They take a lot of funding. So one thing that I am very appreciative of, as CEO Gaddis mentioned at the beginning of the call, is that, you know, we have 2 leaders right now on a task force, on this particular task force, being CEO Gaddis and Director Wells, but the district has launched, under the onus of the White House administration, an actual infrastructure task force. And the reason why I'm saying that is because as we are thinking about the different infrastructure projects that, as you can see, take millions of dollars, there is going to be a gap. And what this group needs to start doing, and I mean the entire group, because the truth is, this is not a DC Water issue, this is not a DOE issue, a DDOT issue, but it's the collective issue, is that we need to start streamlining kind of what is our current project needs, that budget, and then looking at opportunities where we can start messaging and actually making the ask to get these projects over the finish line, and not even over the finish line, but rising to the level of the attention of our decision makers. So as we all know, the Flood Task Force is not actually making any decisions on certain infrastructure projects, but what we can do is be the thought leaders that you all are, and start thinking about ways that we could be looking within our own organizations to start thinking about ways that we could help fund some of these efforts going forward, but then also being able to present a complete and full list back to our city leaders, because we all know that the city will be making the final decision on which of these projects are brought to fruition. And so we need to start making that charge and making our plea. But like I said, you know, we are blessed that we have two of the members on that DC Infrastructure Task Force here with us today. As Monty mentioned at the beginning of the call, it is National Infrastructure Week. We were actually just at a press conference with the mayor and the infrastructure team, as well as with Mayor Landrieu, who is the senior advisor to the White House. And some of the programs and projects that were talked about and discussed in this infrastructure tour had to do with the resilience and the mitigation and making sure that the communities and the neighborhoods that we serve are fortified. And the work that the Flood Task Force is doing is speaking to that. So we just need to make sure that, again, our messaging is aligned and that we're putting the best projects forward that are equitable and resilient, not just for now, but for futures to come. So that's all I have, Monty. And let me know if I missed anything, because this is Alan's slide.
Oh, I mean, it's perfect. It's great. I don't think Alan could have said it any better. Again, this infrastructure list, like we said, is kind of what we are doing. Is the hot list of the projects that the city can go forward with. And so if something's missing, if you're working on something in the background and you don't see it here, and you can't see it here because it's too small, but it's been sent to you, please reach out to DMWA or anyone on this DC Water DOEE leadership, and they will make sure that we get this included as well. All right, so thank you, Opera, for pinch hitting. It's perfect. Next up. So we have our category 8. We're going to continue on with someone else that's representing DMWA for this particular category.
Hello, Meredith Upchurch with DOEE. I'm filling in for Alan Prop from DMWA while he is on vacation. So I'm going to talk about our category 8 actions, flood mitigation planning and coordination. So this is all of the kind of general agency responsibilities that don't fit into other categories. So you already heard about the action plan on outreach, 8.4. So I'm going to touch on where we stand with 8.1 and 8.2 today. We've talked about the DC Silver Jackets, which is a group of all federal and local agencies that work on any aspect of flood mitigation, flood management, jointly chaired by the Army Corps of Engineers, DOE, and DC Water, and HCMA, I believe. So there is an MOU that exists to engage district agencies in participation in the Silver Jackets. It's been probably somewhere in this range of 6 to 8 years since that MOU has been updated. So what we're trying to do is update that MOU to ensure that all district agencies that need to have a role in the Silver Jackets and participation in the Silver Jackets are included in this MOU. So there's a draft of the MOU that's been started, and that coordination is being done through the Silver Jackets meetings and group, and that will be routed to the district agencies for review and signing. So that's our goal with that action, is to have that MOU updated. And then I want to touch on item 8.2, which is formalizing the DC Drainage Committee. So we've been doing some fact finding on how the Drainage Committee operates. And just to give you a quick summary, it's essentially an informal group of representatives from DC Water, DOEE, DDOT, and DCRA who respond to drainage complaints that come from the public. These complaints may come through direct emails, direct phone calls, 311 reports, complaints to political leaders, coming into the HCMA or DC Water call centers. So, you know, they come from anywhere and they come often. And these are complaints that are flooding in the roadway. Maybe it's a clogged catch basin. My backyard is flooded. Water's coming from my neighbor's yard. What can I do about it? So these agencies have an informal process where they investigate the problems, determine which agency it should be given to be responsible for, and then what solutions can be done. And some of the things we've heard are some more formal processes could make that operate better, clear lines of responsibility, and funding to actually fix problems. There are many problems that come in, and there's not sufficient funding to fix all the problems that are brought to the group. So that's some of our initial fact finding on the Drainage Committee, and so we'll be working with all the agencies to come up with some strategies for the Drainage Committee. Any questions on that? Okay, I think we can go to the next one.
Thank you. Thanks, Meredith. Okay, so category 9, we have, I believe this is Vermesia from HCMA, and maybe someone else from her team. Vermesia?
Hi there, everyone. Just making sure I was off mute. Thank you so much, Monty. Yeah, so on the screen shows the category for category 9, dealing with flood emergency planning and response. As you see, we have 2 potential actions that are green light. I will speak to 9.3, and I probably would have to defer to Salil for 9.5 just to get an understanding on that particular action. But hi, Salil. But essentially, 9.3, dealing with installing flash flooding signs at often prone intersections to prevent drivers from driving through flood waters. That project, we have started drafting that action plan with the members of the task force. And we've gotten a lot of good feedback on things that we were not considering. Just as far as the prioritization at that time when this idea was brought to the task force and in the fall, I think we were essentially looking at DDOT intersections in the right of way. But it was, we've been working and having initial conversations with WMATA and understanding potentially how this project could benefit and impact their infrastructure. So we're going to make sure to capture that in the action plan. There will be some takeaways for this group to kind of discuss when we have our opportunity to kind of present to you that action. So more to come with that section. Before I pass it to Salil for number 9.5, I would like to kind of give an overview of some of the work that our operations team has been working on as it relates to 9.1 and 9.2, as well as 9.4. Within 9.1 and 9.2, we essentially, as an agency, will be able to, we're working through that action plan as well. I think we got a lot of good feedback from our previous monthly meeting at the governance meeting regarding just understanding the emergency construct and how that lays out and how we all play together when it comes to operational activities. And so we want to make sure we lay that out as it works now, but then also we found opportunities for improvement. And so I think we'll have a draft and I saw the timeline as far as when our opportunity to present our draft. we will need to come back to this group and go through that a bit more, but we are working through that process now to provide this group something to react to based off the feedback we received at our governance meeting last month. As far as 9.4, dealing with centralized systems for flood complaints, this group of agency partners, which consists of DC Water and DOEE, as well as Unified Communications 311, we are working through just understanding how we connect, and that action plan is starting and is underway. It'll probably be delivered at the same time as 1.2 and 1.1, which will be later in the summer. So I appreciate your patience as we're working through those action plans, and I'll pass it to Salil, who also can give a bit more on 9.4, since DC Water is one of the key contributors to that project, as well as 9.5, which is the visualized platform for emergency response, which was talked about earlier in the introduction by DC Water General Manager. So, Will.
Messiah, thank you very much. I tell you, I've said this multiple times, but it is great working with different agencies because you can get a lot more done. There's no single piece of data or an action. It belongs to any one agency. There's so many agencies that contribute towards it. So it just makes for a better product. CEO Gaddis talked about the win that we had on the emergency management system, the platform, visual platform that we created after the September 10th storm. It was created for our in-house departments so that every department can see what everybody else is doing on a visual platform. We found that a visual platform is really easy to follow. The next step is to open this up to all the DC agencies so that it's available for the people to use. It can also connect into what Vermesia was talking about, flooding in the streets, for WMATA to use to see where the flooding is. It can be used to where the complaints are coming in. 9.4, there's literally, it'll be work in progress for almost a very long time, because as long as you provide the tools, people come up with ideas on how to optimize it. The key is to be able to be flexible to use it. So at present, we're trying to work out with our IT department the cybersecurity issues so that we can expand it out. But we're almost there. So we should have that hopefully by July as a plan.
Thanks, Salil. Monty, I think that's it, unless others have questions. But we're definitely moving ahead, and the first action plan we will have for this group is 9.3.
Hey, thank you so much. So we're going to continue to progress. Vermesia and Salil, always it's great to have you present out. There has been a lot going on these action teams. We've been very busy, which is refreshing to see how well all of the sister agencies are working together to really come up with a plan that's actionable, that's thoughtful, with budget ideas, and we're on the right track. So with that, we're going to go into our next steps, and we are going to give a little bit of homework here. So I think that this is Nick. I'm not sure. I'm so sorry. I just lost my script on who's up next. So I believe this is Nick or Meredith.
Yeah, I can take it. So yeah, I mean, hopefully this isn't going to be a surprise to everyone, but the next steps are, we'll send out the action plans that we just went over this week. So your job will be to review them, share them with your colleagues, and make sure that if you have any changes or there are things you're worried about, please make comments in them or send them to the task force team, and so that we can address them. So that's one thing. The other thing is I think we saw today, if you looked at the spreadsheet, there was a couple of action plans that were green, but we did not present today. So if you are the leader of one of those, you should be working on an action plan. We have a template for you. You should be filling it out and essentially prepare to present it at the July meeting. So that heads up to you, and we'll send out an email reminder on that. And then I guess lastly, if you're not getting the emails, just let us know. I know in some cases people are still getting emails that don't want to be getting emails, but that's a little trickier thing to deal with. But anyways, those are kind of the next steps. And then I don't know if there's a slide after this. Yeah. So the upcoming task force meetings, we're done for meetings for May, but then June 10th will be the governance meeting. June 14th will be residential resilience. And then, the next task force meeting, we'll be doing more action plans, July 20th. So that's the schedule. And yeah, we kind of put at the bottom here, I don't know if there's if folks are aware of, upcoming meetings that are related or conferences that are related that task force members might want to be aware of. This would be a good time to drop them in the chat or come off mute and let us know.
Great. Okay, thanks, Nick. Next slide, Adria, please. All right, so we'll just have some closing remarks here. Just before we continue on, like Nick said, we do want to make sure that we are sending out a lot of communications. So if you are not receiving communications, if you feel kind of mystified by, hey, I don't know if I've gotten anything, that probably is because you're not getting it. So if you haven't gotten something, trust me, we're sending out communications. Please drop a note to Nick Barnard, Salil Kakar, Meredith Upchurch, or Opera Laura, and we will make sure that you are looped in with all of the communications, because we are, rounding out, and we want to make sure that that your agency's participation or your partner participation is included. So next slide, please, Adria. Do we have another slide after this? All right, so let me just offer that if Mr. Gaddis or if Director Wells would like to say any closing remarks here, you're more than welcome to. Otherwise, we will close out, but you're welcome to share some closing thoughts.
Well, I'll jump in and say this is a tremendous amount of work. It's really impressive. This is something that will last far beyond us. It is really, again, it's great for the city. And I know that we've got to prioritize which projects go first and what will be the most impactful and all that. But also note, and I think Opera was getting at this as well, there's a lot of intersectionality between the different groups that are working, making recommendations, whether it be revitalizing downtown or creating resiliency in our neighborhoods around the city. It's there's a lot of intersectionality of not just pipes under the ground and living water above the ground. It all kind of works together. So I just, again, any city would love to have this amount of planning and work being done to kind of guide our investments in keeping our city resilient. So thank you, everybody. It's pretty impressive.
And I would just chime in and say ditto to what Chairman Wells said, that it is a remarkable what has been completed. And when talking about other communities, I've worked in other communities. I've never seen the work rise to this level. It's just unbelievable what we've been able to achieve. And we at DC Water are happy to be a part of this and be able to be involved and contribute in the way that we've contributed thus far. So I want to thank everyone for that and truly appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you, Monty, for leading us.
No, this is, really, it's just a facilitating role what's going on here is really just showing how well our city government works together. And we should all be proud of it. We have a lot more to do. We're not done. We are at just a little past the midway mark. So please continue to pay attention to the communications. Speak up when you have questions or have some thoughts of contribution. If something's not there and is missing, and it's been overlooked, trust me, we're scratching our heads to make sure that that we're including all kinds of types of thinking and perspective. So we're not done. We're still working. But we are we're rounding the corner to try to get to a final product here. So with that, I'd like to say thank you to everyone for joining us. It sounds like we were a quiet bunch today, so maybe the sunshine is a little distracting since we've had so much rain over the last few weeks. But let's give you some more time back in your day. It looks like we are ending about almost like 45 minutes early. So that's a lot of time. You can do a lot with that. And I want to say thank you. So everyone have a good afternoon, and we will see you in a few weeks with the next residential resilience meeting that comes up next. Thank you.
Thanks. Have a
Thank
good
you.
Thank you.